Imagine buying your parents their dream house, only for them to kick you out so your perfect little sister could move in. Sounds unreal, right? But that's exactly what happened to me. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Reese, I'm 28, and I work as a nurse. I've never been rich, but I've always believed in working hard and taking care of my family. When my dad, Dale, lost his job a few years ago, my parents were close to losing their house. I couldn't stand to see them struggle, so I did what any loving daughter would do. I helped. I picked up extra shifts, sometimes pulling double nights at the hospital. I skipped vacations, new clothes, even dinners out. After 2 years of saving, I had enough to help them buy a new place. I co-signed the mortgage and paid most of the down payment. Seeing the smile on my mom's face when she walked into that house for the first time made all the exhaustion worth it. It felt like a new beginning for all of us. My parents, Marianne and Dale, promised that this home would always belong to the family. I even moved into one of the spare rooms since I was still helping with bills. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like home. I thought we were finally stable again. Then my sister Lila graduated college. Lila has always been the golden child, the one who never heard the word no. She's beautiful, charming, and somehow always the victim in every situation. My parents spoiled her rotten, but I didn't care. She was my little sister. I wanted her to do well. When she moved back home, things changed fast. My mom started talking about how Lila needed space to grow. My dad kept saying how Lila deserved a chance to start her life properly. I thought they were hinting that they'd help her get her own apartment. I didn't expect what came next. One night after dinner, my mom said, "Reese, we need to talk." Her tone was serious. She told me that Lila was struggling to adjust and needed the room I was in, that maybe it was time for me to get my own place. I laughed at first, thinking she was joking. I said, "Mom, this is my house too. I helped buy it." But she just looked at my dad, who wouldn't even meet my eyes. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You've had your time here, honey. Let your sister have a turn." It felt like someone had punched me in the chest. I'd worked years for this. The house, the stability, the peace. And now I was being told to leave so Lila could have it. I didn't yell or cry in front of them. I just nodded, packed a few things, and walked out. But inside, something broke that night. I thought I was helping my family. I didn't realize I was just setting myself up to be replaced. The new apartment was small, quiet, and smelled faintly of paint. Reese tried to convince herself it was temporary, that leaving the house didn't mean losing her family. Every month, she still sent money to her parents, covering part of the mortgage and groceries. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about keeping her credit safe and making sure they didn't fall apart. At first, she called every few days, checking in to see how they were doing. But soon every conversation turned into a monologue about Lila. Her mom gushed about Lila's new car. Her dad bragged about how motivated she was. They talked about color schemes for her office space, about curtains, candles, and how the house finally feels bright again. Not once did they ask Reese how her new job rotation was going, or how she was managing the rent on her own. Each call ended with a hollow goodbye. Reese would stare at her phone, wondering when her parents stopped sounding like home. She tried to shrug it off, but something inside her kept twisting tighter. One Saturday morning, Reese decided to drop off a few letters that had been sent to the old address. It felt strange driving up that familiar street, the one lined with maple trees she used to admire on her way home from work. She parked outside the house and noticed new flower pots by the porch, bright pink ones, nothing like her mother's usual earthy tone. She rang the bell. It took a while before Lila opened the door, smiling like she owned the place. "Oh, hey. Didn't expect you," she said, stepping aside half-heartedly. The living room was different, lighter walls, new furniture, everything carefully arranged like a magazine spread. Reese hesitated before walking in. "I just came to drop off some mail," she said, holding out the envelopes. Lila barely looked up. "You can leave them on the table," she said, waving toward the sideboard cluttered with scented candles and framed photos of herself. Reese's eyes wandered toward the hallway. The door to her old room was open. Inside, she saw racks of clothes, boxes of shoes, and a vanity table covered in jewelry. Lila's voice floated from behind her, cheerful and careless. "Oh yeah, I'm turning it into a walk-in closet. You wouldn't believe how much space I needed. Mom said it was fine since you're not using it anymore." Reese didn't respond. She stood at the doorway, looking at the spot where her bed used to be, where she once sat after long shifts, eating takeout and dreaming of better days. Now it smelled like perfume and fresh paint. Lila laughed lightly, saying something about how it finally feels like my space. But Reese barely heard her. Her hands tightened around her keys until her knuckles went white. She felt something sharp and cold forming inside. A quiet, steady anger that didn't rise or fade, just settled deep. Without another word, she turned, walked out of the house, and closed the door behind her. For the first time, it didn't feel like leaving home. It felt like walking away from strangers. Reese couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in her chest. Each night she lay awake in her small apartment, something whispered in the back of her mind. Something wasn't right. Her parents never talked about the mortgage anymore, never mentioned payments or paperwork. Whenever she tried to ask, her mother brushed it off with vague answers. One afternoon, on her day off, Reese decided to find out for herself. The drive to the county records office felt heavier than it should have. The building was quiet, the kind of place that smelled like old folders and stale coffee. She walked up to the front desk and asked for the property file on the house. The clerk typed for a moment, then looked up with a polite smile. "Do you have an ID, ma'am?" Reese slid it across the counter, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman printed a few pages, stapled them together, and handed them over. "Here you go. All current owners are listed right there." Reese's eyes scanned the paper once, then again. Her stomach dropped. Her name, her full legal name, was gone. Only Dale and Marianne were listed as owners. She checked the date of the change. It had been filed 3 months ago, right after she moved out. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Her signature had once been on every page of that contract. She'd been the one who signed the checks, who dealt with the bank calls. Now it was like she'd never existed in the paperwork at all. She drove straight to her parents' house. Lila's car was in the driveway, shiny and spotless as ever. Reese didn't bother knocking. She walked right in. Her parents were sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like it was any other morning. "Why is my name off the deed?" Her voice was calm, but her hands were trembling. Her mother's eyebrows lifted. "What are you talking about?" "I just came from the county office," Reese said, dropping the papers onto the table. "You took me off the title. When did you decide to do that?" Her father sighed, glancing at her mother as if waiting for her to handle it. Marian gave a soft laugh. "Oh, honey, don't be dramatic. It was just a paperwork update. You said the house was for the family, remember?" Reese stared at her, disbelief turning into anger. "A paperwork update? You took my name off without asking me." Marianne leaned back in her chair. "You don't live here anymore, Reese. It didn't make sense for your name to stay. You gave it to us. It's still for the family. Don't make this ugly." The words hit harder than she expected. "Don't make this ugly," as if she was the one causing trouble. Reese stood there for a long moment, her eyes burning. Her father wouldn't even look at her. Lila appeared in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee, watching like it was a scene she'd already seen play out. Without another word, Reese turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind her, the sound sharp and final. In the silence that followed, she understood something she never wanted to believe. Her own family had erased her on purpose. Lila's laughter had a way of finding Reese no matter where she went. Word spread easily in their small town about the dinners, the decorations, the gatherings that filled the house Reese once called her own. People she used to know started mentioning it in passing. "Your sister throws the best parties," they'd say, not realizing how every word felt like salt against skin. Reese tried to ignore it at first. She buried herself in work, picked up extra shifts, kept her head down. But one evening, while stopping by a friend's place, she overheard someone mention her old home. They said Lila had turned it into something beautiful, that she called it her house. That was the moment Reese decided to see for herself. Driving there felt strange, like crossing into a place that belonged to someone else. Music drifted from the open windows. Cars filled the driveway, the lawn lights glowing warm against the night. Reese parked on the curb and walked up quietly. Through the doorway, she saw faces she recognized, people who used to come by when she lived there. Only now they were laughing with Lila, glasses in hand, as if the world had rewritten itself without her. Lila spotted her and grinned, walking over with a drink. "Oh my God, you came. Everyone, this is my sister Reese," she said, her tone playful, proud, and detached all at once. Then she added, "She used to live here before I took over." A few people smiled politely. Reese felt her chest tighten. She managed a small nod before stepping outside for air. The night was cool, but her face burned. She hadn't realized until that moment how easily her family had erased her, not just from the paperwork, but from the story itself. The next morning, she called her parents. Her mother answered first. Reese kept her voice even. "I need to talk to you both." They met at a cafe near her apartment. Reese laid everything out, the way she'd been treated, the parties, the way Lila claimed the house as her own. She wasn't angry at first, just tired. "I helped you get that house," she said quietly. "How can you just let her take over everything?" Her father stirred his coffee, eyes fixed on the table. "Reese, you're overreacting. Your sister's just excited. Don't make this about jealousy." Her mother nodded. "You've been distant lately, sweetheart. Maybe that's why it feels this way." Reese blinked at them, stunned. "Jealous," she repeated. "I bought that house with my savings. I gave you everything I had." Her father finally looked up, his voice firm. "You need to grow up and move on. We're grateful for what you did, but you can't hold it over everyone forever." The words hit harder than she expected. She stood, left some cash on the table, and walked out before her voice could crack. That night, her apartment felt smaller than ever. She sat on the floor, surrounded by the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the city beyond her window. For a long time, she just let the tears fall. Then, as the clock ticked past midnight, a thought surfaced, clear and sharp. Her name might be gone from the deed, but the loan was still under her signature. They hadn't refinanced. They couldn't. And for the first time in months, Reese felt something that wasn't heartbreak, it was power. Reese sat at her small kitchen table, the morning light falling across a stack of unopened mail. One envelope caught her attention, the bank's logo printed in blue across the corner. She tore it open, scanning the lines, her pulse quickening. The statement listed her name right beside her parents. The house she'd been erased from was still attached to her credit. Every payment still carried her responsibility. She called the bank that afternoon. The woman on the other end spoke in a calm, professional tone, clicking through records as Reese explained. "I just need to confirm if my name is still on the mortgage," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes," the representative replied after a pause. "You're a primary signer. We haven't received any refinancing applications since the loan was issued." Reese's jaw tightened. "So even though my name isn't on the deed, I'm still liable for the debt?" "That's correct," the woman said gently. "Unless the other parties refinance in their own names, you remain legally tied to the loan." The call ended and the room felt colder. Her parents had taken her name off the ownership, but left her trapped in the responsibility. They couldn't qualify for the mortgage without her income. That was why they hadn't changed it. They'd used her from the start. Reese leaned back in her chair, eyes on the wall clock ticking above the stove. Each second sharpened her anger into focus. She'd been the safety net, the one keeping everything stable. Without her, the whole illusion would collapse. She opened her laptop and pulled up her account. The automatic transfer for the house payment was still active, quietly draining her every month. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before clicking cancel. The confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure you want to stop this recurring payment?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." The screen blinked once, and it was done. For the first time since she'd moved out, she felt an odd sense of calm. If they wanted the house so badly, they could finally pay for it themselves. She wasn't going to keep cleaning up after people who treated her like she didn't exist. Over the next few days, she made quiet preparations. She gathered receipts, copies of every document, every message that showed her involvement in the mortgage. She wasn't planning to start a fight, not yet. She was just making sure when everything unraveled, and she knew it would, no one could twist the story. At work, she smiled like nothing had changed. At home, she sorted through files and stored them neatly in a folder labeled House. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was protection. Each evening, she imagined the moment her parents realized the payments weren't being made. She pictured their surprise, the confusion, the panic when they learned what she'd already confirmed. The loan depended on her. Without her help, they'd have to face the truth she'd been living with for months. They had built their comfort on her back. Reese didn't plan to warn them. Silence was better. Silence was control. 3 months slipped by quietly. The world went on as usual: work, grocery runs, the occasional coffee with a coworker. Then the first call came. A polite voice from the bank asked to confirm late payments on the mortgage. Reese listened without surprise, pen tapping against the counter. She'd known this moment would come. "Yes, I'm aware," she said evenly. "But I don't live in that property anymore." The caller hesitated, then continued with the script. "Ma'am, your name is still on the account. You're listed as responsible." Reese thanked her, hung up, and made another call, this time to the loan department. When the line connected, she explained everything from the start: how she'd co-signed, how her name had been removed from ownership without consent, how she'd been locked out of a house she helped purchase. The representative asked for proof, and Reese provided everything: copies of the deed, payment records, and correspondence showing she no longer lived there. Hours later, she received an email confirming the file was under review. By the next week, the bank had frozen the account and scheduled an inspection of the property. The silence that followed didn't last long. One evening her phone lit up with her mother's name. She let it ring twice before answering. "Reese," Marian said quickly, voice tight. "We just got a letter from the bank. They're saying the house is in trouble. What did you do?" Reese kept her tone calm. "I told them the truth." Her father's voice came next, louder and sharper. "You've made a mess of everything. We could lose the house." Reese's eyes stayed fixed on the window. "It's not my house anymore, remember?" The line went quiet. For once, they had nothing to say. Over the next few weeks, the calls multiplied. Sometimes it was her parents begging. Sometimes it was Lila crying, claiming she had nowhere else to go. Reese never raised her voice. She repeated the same words each time, steady and final. "I can't help you with something that doesn't belong to me." Then came the notice from the bank, pre-foreclosure. It was official. The payments had stopped, the loan frozen, and the process had begun. Reese read the letter twice before folding it neatly and placing it in her folder of documents. That night, she sat by her window as rain tapped against the glass. Somewhere across town, the house that once carried her name was standing in silence, its lights dim, its future uncertain. She imagined her parents sitting at that same kitchen table where they'd once told her to leave, papers scattered, voices low and frightened. She didn't smile or gloat. She simply breathed, slow and steady. The balance had shifted, and there was nothing left for her to say. The calls stopped after that. Only the bank kept in touch, sending updates about the proceedings. Each envelope was another reminder of what she'd already known. Every lie eventually demands payment, and this time, it wouldn't come from her. The knock came late, sharp and desperate. Reese opened the door to find Lila, drenched from the rain, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Her perfect hair clung to her face, her hands shaking as she clutched a soaked purse. Behind her, the hallway light flickered, throwing shadows across her once flawless image. "Can I come in?" she whispered, voice breaking. Reese stepped aside without a word. Lila stumbled into the apartment, her heels clicking across the floor before she sank onto the couch. The silence between them stretched. "They're taking everything," Lila said finally, staring at her trembling hand. "The furniture, the piano, even that dining table Mom loved. The bank sent men to inventory the house this morning." Reese leaned against the counter, arms crossed, saying nothing. Lila kept talking, words spilling out faster. "They said it's going up for auction. They said there's nothing left to do. Mom's been calling every lawyer she can find. Dad won't leave his room." She looked up, eyes wide and red. "Do you have any idea what that feels like?" Reese didn't answer. Lila's breath hitched. "My friends don't even talk to me anymore. I threw one party, and now they all act like I'm some kind of joke. They said I should have known the house wasn't really ours. How was I supposed to know?" Still, Reese stayed quiet. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the rain outside. Lila's voice softened to a fragile whisper. "You could have stopped this. You could have helped." Reese finally looked at her, eyes calm and unreadable. "Help?" she said quietly. "You mean fix it again, like always?" Lila blinked. "You ruined everything," she said, her tone rising, angry now through the tears. "You wanted this. You wanted to see us fall." Reese took a slow step forward. "No, Lila," she said evenly. "You ruined everything. I just stopped cleaning up your mess." Lila stared at her, words caught in her throat. The truth sat heavy between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain hit harder against the window, filling the silence that followed. Lila's shoulders slumped, her fight draining away. She wiped at her face, leaving smudges across her skin. Reese walked to the door and opened it. "You should go home," she said softly. Lila hesitated, searching her sister's expression for something, pity, forgiveness, anything. But Reese's face was calm, almost detached. "Where am I supposed to go?" Lila whispered. Reese didn't answer. The doorway glowed faintly from the streetlight outside, and for the first time, Lila looked small, unsure, lost. She picked up her purse and moved past her sister, her heels echoing down the hall until the sound disappeared completely. Reese closed the door, turned off the light, and stood still in the darkness. There was no satisfaction, no triumph, only quiet certainty. The balance that had once been broken had finally settled. The notice arrived quietly, one short letter confirming what Reese already knew. The house had been sold. No dramatic ending, no last-minute rescue. Just a clean transaction, a number, a date, and a new owner's name that meant nothing to her. She placed the paper on the table and stared at it for a long time, feeling nothing. No anger, no grief, only stillness. Weeks later, she heard from a neighbor that her parents had moved out. They'd found a small rental on the edge of town, a single-story place with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Reese drove past it once on her way to work, just to see. The curtains were drawn, the yard empty. It looked like a life that had finally run out of excuses. She didn't stop. With her name clear of the loan and her savings slowly rebuilding, Reese began searching for a place of her own. She didn't want anything grand, just a home that belonged to her alone. No shared signatures, no promises attached. After months of searching, she found it. A small cottage with creaky floors, chipped cabinets, and a little garden in the back. When she signed the papers, she felt her hands tremble, but not from fear. It was relief, clean, honest relief. The first night there, she sat on the floor eating takeout from the carton, boxes still sealed around her. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It felt earned. Every corner of that house carried her name, and hers alone. A few days later, her phone buzzed with a familiar number. She almost ignored it, but answered anyway. Her father's voice came through, rough and tired. "We're struggling out here, Reese. The rent's high, and your mother's not well. You've got your own place now. Maybe you could help, just for a while." Reese listened, letting the words settle. The old guilt tugged at her, the part of her that always wanted to fix things. But that feeling didn't last. She looked around her little living room, the peeling wallpaper, the sunlight spilling across the floorboard, and knew she couldn't go back to being the one who carried everyone else. "Dad," she said quietly, "family loyalty works both ways. You taught me that." He hesitated. "You're saying no?" "I'm saying I've done enough." There was silence on the other end, then a long sigh. "You've changed," he muttered. Reese's voice stayed steady. "No, I just stopped apologizing for." When the call ended, she placed the phone face down and went to the window. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, scattering leaves across the yard. She watched them drift, feeling no weight in her chest, no pull backward. The past had finally stopped following her. For the first time in years, she didn't know anyone anything. The little house creaked softly around her, like it was exhaling with her, both of them learning what peace really sounded like. It started with whispers. Small ones, passed along in grocery store aisles, over coffee tables, and at quiet weekend gatherings. Reese didn't start them. She didn't have to. The truth found its own way out. Lila was the first crack in the silence. She couldn't stop talking, couldn't bear the thought of people forgetting her story. She told anyone who'd listen about losing the house, about how unfair life had been, about how her sister had turned her back on family. But the more she talked, the more people began to piece things together. Neighbors remembered who paid for that house in the first place. Friends recalled how often Reese had worked late shifts, how tired she'd looked but still helped her parents. Even relatives who had once taken Marianne and Dale's side began to question the story they'd been fed. The words came back to Reese slowly, through secondhand comments. One coworker mentioned that someone from church had spoken well of her. Another said an old neighbor had defended her, saying she'd done more for her family than anyone realized. It spread quietly, not as gossip, but as recognition. Meanwhile, her parents grew more isolated. Invitations stopped. Old friends who once joined their Sunday dinners didn't call anymore. At the local store, Marianne's bright voice turned tight when people looked away instead of saying hello. Dale stopped showing up to his weekly poker nights altogether. Reese noticed the shift, but didn't take pleasure in it. She hadn't wanted revenge to look like this. It had never been about destroying them. It was about truth, and now the truth was finally standing on its own. One afternoon, she ran into Mrs. Abbott, their former neighbor, at the farmer's market. The older woman smiled gently. "You did what you had to do, dear," she said. "No one blames you. We all know what really happened." Reese thanked her and moved on, her chest feeling lighter than it had in months. As the weeks passed, her name began to mean something different. Not the naive daughter who let her family walk all over her, not the one who'd been pushed out of her own home, but someone who had drawn a line and refused to cross it again. Even Lila's words lost their sting. Every complaint, every exaggerated retelling of the past only made her sound more desperate. Eventually, people stopped listening altogether. Reese didn't correct anyone's stories or defend herself. She didn't need to. The truth had already done the work. On a quiet evening, she sat outside her little house, the sun dipping low behind the trees. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, and she thought of how far she'd come, from the girl who bought her parents a home to the woman who built her up. For the first time, her name didn't feel heavy. It felt clean, solid, hers again. Morning light filled the kitchen, soft and golden across the pale countertops Reese had picked herself. The air smelled faintly of coffee and the lavender candle she always lit on her days off. Boxes were gone now, shelves neatly lined, everything in its place. The house was still small, but every inch of it felt steady, earned. She moved through her routine in silence, barefoot on the cool tile, humming under her breath as she poured her coffee. Outside, birds stirred in the garden, the world calm and uncomplicated. It wasn't the kind of happiness that shouted. It was quieter than that. It sat deep in her chest, warm and still. Months had passed since the sale. No more phone calls. No more guilt. The noise that used to fill her head, pleas, excuses, apologies, was gone. What replaced it was space. She could breathe in it. She could exist without being pulled apart. When the mail slipped through the slot that afternoon, she almost didn't look. Most days it was nothing: flyers, bills, catalog. But one envelope caught her eye. The handwriting was unmistakable, a careful mix of her father's block letters and her mother's looping script. She stood for a long moment before opening. The paper inside smelled faintly of the house they'd lost, old wood and dust, a scent she hadn't realized she'd remembered. "Reese," it began. "We're sorry for how things turned out. We just need a little time to get back on our feet. Could we stay with you for a few weeks? It would mean a lot." The words blurred for a moment before she folded the letter neatly, pressing the crease with her thumb. The kitchen was quiet again, the clock ticking softly above the sink. She stared at the folded paper in her hands, then walked to the trash bin, lifted the lid, and let it fall. The sound was small, a soft rustle, but final. Reese turned back to the counter and picked up her coffee. The sunlight had shifted, brighter now, streaking across the walls in gentle lines. She took a sip and exhaled slowly, the tension leaving her shoulders. There was no anger left, no urge to explain or defend herself. The past didn't pull at her anymore. What was broken had been left where it belonged, behind her. She opened the back door, stepping out into the yard. The grass was cool beneath her feet, the breeze carrying the scent of new growth. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked, children laughed, life went on. Reese smiled, not wide, but enough. She felt the weight of everything she had carried finally lift. This was hers. Every morning, every quiet moment, every inch of space built from her own strength. No borrowed promises, no shared signatures, no more saving anyone but herself. She took another breath, slow and full, letting it fill her chest. Then, with the sun warm against her face, she whispered to the open air, calm and certain, "Not this time. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away? Or should I have given my family another chance?" I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoy stories like mine, don't forget to subscribe.